One by one, we are finding the illegal gang members, drug dealers, thieves, robbers, criminals, and killers, and we are sending them the hell back to where they came from. That was a quote and a platform that was used by our current president to address immigrants in this country. The word immigrant has held a negative connotation in the U.S. for a very long time, and it's time to change. I myself am an immigrant. I was born in the U.S. along with my family, and my dad left in search for better opportunities for us when I was 5 years old. He led a lavish lifestyle in Ethiopia since he was the head of flight instructor for the Ethiopian Airlines. But he knew that education opportunities were not great in Ethiopia, so he came here to do his master's. 2 years later, we joined him in the U.S., and he graduated with his master's. He had an F2 visa. For those of you that don't know that, that's a student visa, and after a certain amount of time, after you graduate, you lose your visa if you do not have a job. After his graduation, it was very hard for him to find a job, therefore we were considered illegal because he didn't find a job within that amount of time. Luckily, there was a lot of hard work. My dad eventually found a job and the visa was renewed, and now he has his PhD, he has his own house, he pays taxes, and he's now head of the Metropolitan Water District in Laverne. My name is Alethia, and I'm here to argue that illegal immigration positively affects the nation as a whole. First and foremost, immigrants help the economy by paying taxes and creating jobs. According to the New York Times, there's over 41.7 million immigrants in the U.S., of which 28% are illegal. These illegal immigrants contribute approximately $588 million annually in state and local taxes, $454 million from sales and excise taxes, and $454 million in property taxes. So in total annually, they contribute $11.6 billion to the U.S. economy. These immigrants also pay a higher tax rate than the top 1% of the United States. They are employed and they create jobs. 8.4% of illegal immigrants are employed in the U.S. and they also represent 5.2% of the U.S. labor force. This alone should be a reason that the U.S. should try and implement a system to give illegal immigrants a speedy and effective path to legalization. I myself became a citizen about 5 months ago, and the process was agonizing and long, and the paperwork that you have to do is so brutal and gruesome. My parents held documents since we moved to the U.S., and we were not allowed outside of the U.S. We weren't allowed to do certain things just to make sure our citizenship was going to be safe and we weren't going to have any issues. Secondly, many Americans like to repeat the statement, illegal immigrants take our jobs. That's why we don't want them. It's all over the news, it's all over the newspapers. But they help in many industries, especially the agriculture industry. They suffer through treacherous amounts of work in the hot fields, and they smuggle themselves through the hot desert, and they pay people to bring them here just to work in conditions that U.S. citizens are not willing to work in. Mm-hmm. Just to refute this, the United States United Farmers Workers Association did a study, and around that time the unemployment rate was 10%, and of those 10, they offered 10% of the unemployed Americans jobs, and only 3% of those people accepted the jobs. And the agriculture industry has repeatedly said that Americans do not want these jobs. Illegal immigrants are the backbone of the agriculture industry because Americans refuse to do the gruesome work that illegal immigrants do in the fields. The agriculture business also depends on illegal immigrants because they are able to pay them extremely low wages due to the fact that they're extremely in need of a job and a reason to stay in the U.S. and to help out their families, and they exploit them because of that. so they're able to get hours and hours of work for a little amount of pay. Lastly, the U.S. benefits greatly from illegal immigrants because as of late, they are now allowed to enlist in the U.S. military and Navy. There are about 60,000 immigrants within the U.S. Army, and 10,000 of them are illegal. They recruit 5,000 immigrants a year into the U.S. Army, and they benefit greatly from those numbers. So these illegal immigrants are not allowed to have the benefits of U.S. citizens, but they're able to sacrifice their lives just like U.S. citizens for our country, which in my eyes is extremely unfair. So in conclusion, U.S. illegal immigrants not only help us in the military, but they bring in billions of dollars in tax revenue, and they increase our GDP and contribute to many industries within the U.S. Thank you.
All right, Alethia, the proposition is clearly identified. There's not really a preview of what the structure is going to be. I think we all understand that there's something controversial about this, and the opening quote that you use identifies that to some degree. Although nothing that you say addresses the stuff that's in the opening quote, you kind of go in different directions in supporting the position that you're taking. In the body of the speech, I think that there are 3 points. One, that it's creating jobs. One, the second one also sounds like it's a jobs-based one, but it's like a denial that it's taking jobs. And the third one is the idea about benefits military enlistment. That's the structure as best as I could figure it out. I'm not sure, though, that those are the points that you were trying to base your argument on, and it should be a lot clearer. The personal story is fine at giving you a little bit of credibility. However, there are several things in your argument, and especially in that third point, that clearly suggest that this is a value claim at times rather than an issue of fact. The argument, for example, on the third point that says it's not fair, I mean, you even say the phrase it's not fair or it's unfair. That's a value claim. You can't use a value claim to support a claim of fact. If there is a benefit that occurs from allowing illegal immigrants to enlist, tell us about that benefit. Tell us how much money we save, or how we meet our enlistment goals, or how it reduces costs to the military to be able to do those kinds of things. Those would be the factual issues that you could use to support that particular point. On the question of the economic advantages, you have talked about the impact that immigrants have on the economy, and remember the dispute is going to be about what impact illegal immigrants have had on the economy. And you've given us part of the comparison. There seems to be no explanation about whatever costs might be borne as a result of people being here. There are, of course, social costs that come along with this. Schools, hospitals, housing, all that sort of thing that has to be taken care of. And so if you want to argue that there's an on-balance advantage, that's good, but you need to have some evidence that makes that comparison for that first point, and we don't get any of that information. The second point on illegal immigrants not taking jobs, almost all of your argument here is dependent on the agricultural community, and I'm not sure how significant that is in terms of total illegal immigration employment. You mentioned that there are 41 million immigrants in the country working, 28 million of them are illegal, and what percentage of them are in the agricultural industry? That's not clear, but that's what all of your information is based on here, and it's not based on some of the other jobs that might be available, and I think that that's a little bit problematic. Your reference to the research from, I think it's the UFW, the United Farm Workers Union study is a little cryptic. I think you want a direct quote on that. It sounds like you're kind of paraphrasing and you're a little bit uncertain about what it is that the evidence says itself. I certainly am, based on what you've said, and I think I've run into that problem in a couple of other places. There's some good numerical information from the New York Times, but then there's a whole bunch of statistics that continue after that. I wasn't sure if that came from the Times or if that's from some other source, or if there was no source whatsoever for it. All right, thank you.